he was back to being on stage, the number one guy.
Yeah.
And that was just before he passed. He never would have had that opportunity.
Now, speaking of stories about Eddie that made it to the book, you as the publisher actually wrote a 2-page introduction, essentially a foreword to the book. Now, was that always part of the plan, or did that come along the way? When did you decide that you wanted to, rightfully so, insert yourself into the narrative of Eddie's book?
Well,
and what was your thinking behind what you wanted to accomplish by doing that?
Well, I wanted my picture in the book. I'm even taking flack from my daughter, Nicole, because she's the only family member, I think, that we didn't manage to get a picture in there, and that's an oversight. So we had a couple of events here with Eddie. No, the reason I wrote the foreword was he was such a special guy to me, and I wanted to tell everybody how this book came about, which I've kind of told everybody here now. It just came about out of nowhere. Really, the most interesting thing about it, or the most important thing about it, was everybody, including Ken Reed's publisher for his books, said, "Brian, it's ridiculous. You're never going to be able to get a book out there in time." And I said, there was something about it. I said, I'm not one to procrastinate.
For better or worse, anyone who's worked for you knows this as well. It's exhausting, but without fail, whatever the goal that's been set is reached.
There's a way to do it. And so Ken agreed, Eddie agreed, we all devoted ourselves. We had great work by Richard McCorkle, as I mentioned, the Ultimate Leaf fan, Mike Wilson, and Paul Passo assist. Anybody I knew that could contribute, all decided they would help out. We got the book done. We got it in the stores. And I knew that a bestseller sports book in Canada is 5,000 units.
Right.
And I knew, without any stores at all, that I could do 5,000 books out of the trunk of my car as long as Eddie was willing to do it with me.
Yeah.
Because he will sell the books. Indigo helped a lot, and we have it on Amazon as well. But Eddie and I sold books everywhere we went. I flew him down to Philadelphia to do the podcast Spit and Chicklets.
Right.
And they loved them.
Right. That's a huge one that we didn't. I mean, Spit and Chicklets, obviously an enormous podcast, but they have an episode in their collection that was done as part of this tour.
And Eddie didn't know who Spit and Chicklets was. He doesn't follow podcasts, but he had a great time with them. We flew down to Philadelphia and back in one day.
Yeah.
So that was another day. But the beauty of getting this thing done, we went on tour for the end of November all through December, and then we were going to pick it back up in January, and Eddie got diagnosed with cancer.
Right.
So he had throat cancer, and they went through treatments, and then he had all sorts of issues where he fell, and then he was hospitalized, and I even heard stories about how he had days to live, and I got really...
A few times.
Yeah, I got really upset with that because, people are rushed so hard to be the first to break news, even if it's not accurate.
Well, I think you're referring specifically to a tweet that went kind of viral.
Right.
That you, through Frameworth's Twitter account, replied to essentially set the record straight, because this was months before Eddie had passed away, and it was essentially almost an obituary notice from the person.
And Eddie was in pretty rough shape at one point, but he rebounded.
Right.
But it was like Eddie's very close to passing away, blah blah blah, and I just thought, boy, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And it was a very well respected sports writer and a good one. He just jumped the gun a little bit. And I talked to Ken Reed about it as well, and he said, everybody in our business needs to, is trying to get the first, to break the news.
Right.
So that was all fine. We got that straightened away, and then he passed away. I think it was in July, and it's unfortunate because he couldn't have the fanfare, the funeral that he deserved, etc.
Well, that is definitely unfortunate. However, I think the silver lining is that, everyone always talks about the biggest celebration you're ever thrown is at your funeral, but you don't get to experience that.
Right.
He didn't know what was coming. No one knew it was coming, but that almost makes this tour that much more special.
I get emotional when I think about it because we spent a month together just prior to him getting sick.
Right.
And virtually every day. Some were very trying for me.
Yep.
I'm trying to run a business and be with Eddie, and he, there was times where he got a little grumpy and tired,
Sure.
and I got a little grumpy and tired. But for the most part, spending a month with Eddie, hearing the same stories and new ones, and then talking to his wife Norma, and being part of it with Richard and McCorkle, who designed the book, and Ken Reed, who wrote the book, spending all that time. But Eddie was front and center in the limelight.
Right.
He was back to being on stage, the number one guy.
Yeah.
And that was just before he passed. He never would have had that opportunity. And if it wasn't for me saying, we're doing this in November, instead of the following November, the book never would have been done.
Well, that is one of those things that you never could have known when you planned it.
No.
But it is true. Had you not forced, the elephant in the room that we're kind of dancing around is the fact that Eddie would have passed away before we could have finished the book.
Right.
And once, even let's, never mind finishing the book. I think for him, the most important thing was the tour. And, yes, the book exists, that's fine, but he's illiterate. He's not going to read it, right? Like that was never the point. The point was for him to have a resurgence in the public eye and to be able to go on this tour and to be the entertainer again, which even had we been able to publish the book, we realize he's sick. Okay, Eddie, let's get these stories onto paper. Let's publish it. There's no way he was going to be doing the tour. Had we been a couple months later, not to mention COVID happened immediately after.
The most important thing about this book was not that it was published. That was great, and it exists, and everybody's so proud of it. The most important thing for me was to put Eddie back on that stage that he was in for so many years, where people had he faded off a little bit, and then he was back there front and center doing his shtick, and it was amazing to watch. People loved him. A whole new generation of people found out about him because you couldn't miss it. He'd be in an Indigo store. He'd be at a hockey game, and
he'd be on TV. He'd be on.
Kids are going, "Who is that guy?"
Yes.
And why is everybody crowding around him?
Yeah.
He had a smile on his face the whole time. He was so gracious with everybody. And so that's the most important thing. Second most important thing was we have a bestseller.
That's, yeah.
Eddie's book sold over 6,000 copies.
Yep.
And that makes me feel pretty proud of the accomplishment that we had. But more important than all that was just the time I spent with Eddie.
And for him, getting back into the entertainer, on the first page, right next to the introduction, you have a quote from him. I'm the entertainer of the century. I'm holding that up in front of the camera if you're watching on YouTube. And he got to be the entertainer once again before everything kind of shut down with COVID, and he was experiencing some sicknesses as well. Thank you so much for watching this clip of the Sign Off, a Frameworth podcast. Just a reminder that we have full episodes of the Sign Off available wherever you get your podcasts, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Make sure to like and subscribe on whichever platform you use. You can find us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or on Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter at Retrograde Mikey. Finally, feel free to send us emails with your questions you want us to answer on the show, and we may feature you live. You can do that by sending your emails to signoffpod@frameworth.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you with a new episode every single Thursday.